to today's episode of Insights with Us. I'm Anastasia, a licensed professional counselor, trauma therapist, owner of Happy Mind Wellness Company, a Colorado-based therapy practice, and creator of this podcast. My goal is to use this platform to help others find their voice as we share journeys, as we learn more about ourselves in life. Growth happens when you get uncomfortable, which happens when we sit with new ideas we haven't sat with before. I hope that we can work on this journey of personal growth and understanding together. As a disclaimer, there may be swearing in this podcast, but sometimes we get caught up in the human experience. It happens. And sometimes we can talk about difficult or activating topics. So maybe put on some headphones if you need to, and remember that support exists for you if you want it. Today, I want to talk about representation. This topic is important because the more representation we have for different types of people, the more you can be your authentic self, because you aren't trying to fit the box of societal norms, and you have the freedom to explore who you are. No matter your identity, representation and acceptance of others helps you. Before we get started, I'd also like to take a moment and name one of my partners, Occupied Mind. It is a clothing company with unique hand-drawn designs for every feeling. Today, I am wearing my self-scare shirt, and on the back it says cried, but did it anyway. Let me show you. Hold on, let me pause this. So on the back, I don't know if you can see it. It's fine. Because sometimes we need to cry. Sometimes we need to rest. And sometimes we need to show up in the tears. Building insight is knowing which option to choose when. I spent last week recharging, and I wanted this shirt to symbolize that it is time to get back into the fight for acceptance while taking care of myself at the same time. Find your own feelings in shirt form at occupiedmind.com using code INSIGHTSWITHUS15 for a discount at checkout. Once again, that's INSIGHTSWITHUS15 at occupiedmind.com. That's OCTOPIEDMIND.com. And maybe add a unique twist to your wardrobe. So I'm going to start this episode on representation by talking about left-handedness. And yes, this is relevant. I am so passionate about this, and I really hope that it speaks to you. I've been wanting to say these words for a while. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, being left-handed was seen as a bad thing, as abnormal and wrong, in some areas even a sign of the devil. And if someone was born left-handed, they were forced to learn how to use their right hand, to write, to eat, to exist. And if they slipped into using their left hand, in school for example, they would get smacked with a ruler and told to switch hands. How messed up is that? And then around 1920, suddenly, there was a shift. It was no longer a sign of evil, and left-handed people were allowed to exist as their amazing and brilliant selves. And yes, I'm biased because I'm left-handed with an ambidextrous flair. Really depends on what activity I'm doing. But if you look at the data of occurrences of left-handed people, there was next to no one who reported being left-handed prior to the 1920s because it was not allowed. Once it was deemed socially acceptable, there was that huge jump in reported left-handedness. This is not because there were no left-handed people in existence and then suddenly people were being born left-handed. It's because you were suddenly allowed to name that you were left-handed and not be ostracized, punished, or forced to be something different. It is so fucked up that people were seen as evil for being left-handed. It doesn't make sense. And, a lot of people in this world agree about that right now. Because in modern times, if someone writes with their left hand, no one bats an eye. It is normal to the point that we don't even need to mention it. Other than when I see someone who's left-handed, I'm like, hey, me too, this is great. This is why representation matters. In that transition for left-handed people between evil and accepted, there was someone who was still terrified to write with their left hand. And if they saw someone else doing it freely, they might feel more safe to do so themselves. They might think, wait, they didn't get yelled at. They didn't get smacked with a ruler. Well, maybe I can write with my left hand. Maybe I can do what feels natural and authentic for me. And thus the exponential rise in left-handedness in history. This example is a connection point, a chance for insight into other identities and groups of people who are still fighting for safety today. Whether you have a difference in religion, sexuality, gender identity, or you just want to wear an outfit that feels great for you but doesn't quite fit the norm, being able to see others out in the world showing up similarly and not being yelled at, judged, bullied, or abused because of it allows you to feel more comfortable exploring what makes you you. In an article written in Psychology Today by Kevin Leo Yabut-Nadal, PhD, he discussed how representation can reduce stereotypes, provide validation and support, and even increase confidence in children and adolescents who are afraid they don't fit in. If you were surrounded by a culture of people who looked and acted vastly different from you, and it was all you ever knew, you'd feel like there was something wrong with you, that you needed to hide parts of yourself in order to fit in. And then imagine that a family moved to your area who did look like you, shared your beliefs, and who was excited to bond with you over shared experiences. That access to community builds safety within your nervous system. This is one form of representation. And then imagine you turned on the television and there was another group of people who, once again, looked like you, talked like you, and believed like you. You wouldn't feel alone. You would feel seen and understood in a whole new way. This is another form of representation. For groups of us who are in the majority, like I am Caucasian, I'm white, I can turn on the TV and every single channel I'm going to see a white person. It is easy for me to feel included. I want that feeling for everyone. It helps us feel not alone and helps us feel not crazy in who we are. So let's look at another example. Imagine that when you were growing up, every adult relationship in your life involved screaming, yelling, throwing objects at each other. There was an inability to slow down and be curious and listen to each other. They didn't care what the other person might be going through that's leading to this conflict. And if your parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, adult friendships, everyone fought this way, but stayed married, said they loved each other, they might even say something like, well, this is just how it is. You're going to believe that. There is no representation for any other type of relationship. So of course, you're going to believe that that's normal. And if this type of relationship in your mind is the only one that exists, you're going to be willing to stay in a relationship where you are yelled at, abused, or made to feel scared the majority of the time. It's just how it is. So there's no point in looking for something different. There's no point in being different. Next, I want you to imagine that you moved away for a job or something, and you find a group of friends whom you love, and you go over to a friend's place for dinner. And while you're there, your friend and their significant other have a miscommunication. You might tense up. You're ready for a fight, ready for the TV remote to be thrown across the room. But the yelling never comes. Instead, the couple talks through the miscommunication, asks questions. They want to understand the other person's point of view. And at the end, they're laughing together and just move on. You would be so confused. Was this always an option? Is this real? Is this possible? You might start to realize what has been missing in your life. You could even start to notice that this is the type of relationship that you want. And you might not be willing to settle for anything less, because you do deserve to feel loved and accepted in this world exactly as you are. This is what it feels like when a Latina girl turns on the TV and says Mirabel from Encanto. She might think, wow, she looks like me. Is that possible? This is what it feels like when someone who has been in the closet their whole lives suddenly sees a gay couple relaxing together, in person or on the TV. They might think, I might have a chance for happiness too. This is what it feels like when you are a loving, empathetic, accepting person of faith who in our current world primarily hears voices of hate and separation, and you see a pastor online talking about inclusion. You might think, well, maybe I can be inclusive too. This is what it felt like for me when I grew up with Christian relatives in a Muslim country with Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, and atheist friends. Speaking specifically religiously here, I had every type of belief represented. Everyone was accepted for who they were. Again, at least religiously they were. And so I was able to take a step back and be curious about all these different religions represented and figure out what fit for me. And I was accepted for what I ended up settling into. You're allowed to grow. You are allowed to change your mind, and you are allowed to be different from your neighbor. This does not make you wrong or your neighbor wrong. It really just makes you different. Hank Green once said something along the lines of, I like to let my perspective wander, and I like to let my certainty wander. Because we are constantly changing our minds based on our experiences and what is normalized and represented in our society. And being able to wander, as Hank Green put it, with our beliefs and be curious about whether or not anything new or different fits within our value systems allows us to grow and heal as people. How can you do this? How can you let your perspective and certainty wander? My favorite way is by listening to other people's stories, especially people who are different from me. I have loved doing this long before I was a therapist, and it's probably one of the reasons I became a therapist. Did you ever have a moment when you were a child and you realized that you have different thoughts from the person next to you? I did. And if you can have different thoughts, then how do you know that you're seeing the same event in the same way? Well, you don't. Not unless you ask them about it. If someone has a story to tell, I want to listen to it. I like hearing about growth and progress, but also about pain and moments of triumph. I like knowing who the person in front of me is and how they think. And if I go through something with someone else, I always like to take a moment and see if we experienced it in the same way or if we experienced it differently. Again, please notice that I am not saying right or wrong here. I'm just saying different. So the next time that you are with someone who looks slightly different than you, whether they're just dressed in a way that you would never dress, or maybe you're cisgender or hetero, or maybe you're queer, and the person next to you is clearly straight, or they are clearly queer, or whatever their identity is, you can tell that it's different from who you are. Or even someone who has a different skin color than you. I challenge you to try striking up a conversation with them from a place of curiosity and how do you think? And I don't mean tell me your deepest secrets. Who are you really? What makes you tick? We don't need to go to that level. Not until you've built some trust. Okay, we don't need to be trauma dumping on anybody. But what I mean is, actually ask some curious questions like, how is your day going so far? Or have you done anything fun recently? Do you have any restaurants that you'd recommend? Or one of my favorite questions to ask anyone, even if we've just met, is when you are alone and have a chunk of time completely to yourself, what do you choose to do for fun? Another favorite of mine is, are you currently following your dreams? It isn't about trying to get deep or trying to understand every aspect of this other person's being. It's just getting to know the other person as a human being. Because we're all human and we all have to share this planet. And we all have so much more in common than we think we do. And you'll realize as you practice this wandering of perspective, that even though they may look or seem different from you in maybe a very obvious way, there are so many similarities. I want to emphasize that representation matters not because we are trying to convince someone to change, that if you see a gay person on TV, that means you're supposed to be gay too. No, this is false. This is bullshit. Don't listen to that. Representation matters because without it, society starts to believe that these other identities don't exist. As a whole, they're not supposed to be there. They're out of the norm and therefore they're wrong. So then if one person shows up in that out of norm identity, the majority is going to go, well, that's not supposed to be there. You're not supposed to be there. You need to change who you are. That's false. That's bullshit. Representation allows us to look at people who are different from us and go, well, that doesn't fit who I am, but I'm glad they found who they are. At no point does someone else having an identity different from yours actually affect or change who you are. It has nothing to do with you. But them being free to be themselves does mean you're then free to be yourself. It can only be good for all of us. Representation allows all of us to exist within each of our identities. It allows for the overlap and intersectionality of identities, which maybe I'll talk about at some point in the future because intersectionality is beautiful. And it allows for the complex human experience in all its variations. You can have multiple identities at once, and having similar beliefs in one area doesn't mean you have to match those beliefs in others. You're allowed to be different. Do not put your beliefs or identities on your neighbor. Do not try to force others to fit into your box, because it feels terrible when someone tries to convince you to be someone you're not. Why would you want to do that to the person next to you? All of us get to exist exactly as we are, and it actually doesn't hurt the other person until we try to enforce those beliefs. And then there is hurt, there is pain, there is trauma, there is abuse, there is violence. That's what we're trying to stop. Because whatever you believe in terms of your identity, your religion, what helps get you through the day, what gets you out of bed, what helps you navigate difficult stressors in your life, whatever that is that helps you feel like you is right. As long as you understand that whatever I believe, whatever gets me through the day, whatever helps me feel like me is right too. Again, I'm really passionate about this stuff. I could talk about it forever. I could go into more complex examples, but I'm trying to keep it simple today. Short and sweet, in the hopes of you slowing down in it and maybe finding some of that curiosity. Because again, it's not about which one is right and which one is wrong and how are we all supposed to show up as people. We're supposed to show up as ourselves. And we all get to be beautifully different and unique. So hopefully, something we talked about today resonated with you. If it did, let yourself sit with that idea for a little while longer. If you have any questions for this podcast or any themes you'd like us to focus on in the future, send us a message on Instagram at Insights With Us Podcast, or send us an email at insightswithus@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please follow, like, or subscribe. If you want to support the continuation of this podcast, you can donate. To do so, find me, Anastasia Soroka, on buymeacoffee.com. You can also find Insights With Us on Substack for exclusive content, including videos, transcripts from these episodes, which will slowly be released over time, and other writings about my insight journey. I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you are listening. Thank you for creating insight with us, and for anybody who has stuck around long enough to reach this point in the episode, and for those of you that are watching it on Substack, because I got a video, I also want to give you a chance to not just look at Juliet's butt, but look at her. She's so cute. She's adorable. Okay. I love you all.